from the Unit 6 test is split up into sections from earlier in the chapter. So the first things are naming a polynomial. That is section 1. And to name them, you have two different ways of naming it. You have the number of terms, and I'm going to give you an example of this in a minute, and you have the degree. Okay, so number of terms means like how many different things do you have. Terms are separated by a plus and a minus, by adding and subtracting. So if you just have one term, if you just have one, then you call it a monomial, okay, because there's only one term. If you have two, you call it a binomial. If you have three, you call it a trinomial. And if you have four or more, it's just called a polynomial, right? It's just, poly means many. So terms, I'll give you an example. A binomial is something like 2x plus 5. Notice, 2x is a term and 5 is a term. So that's two terms. That's an example of a binomial. A monomial would be just 2x. A trinomial would have three things instead of two. This has two things. And a polynomial, one that's more than three, would have four different things. So that's number of terms. Degree is their exponent. So if it just has x, that's linear. If it's x squared, that is quadratic, right? If it's x to the third, that is cubic. And if it's x to the fourth, that would be quartic, which stands for quarter. There's 4 quarters. And it would keep going from there. So if I had something that said 2x to the third plus 5x squared, like that, that would be a cubic, because it goes to the third power, that's the highest degree. Binomial, because there's two terms here. The 2x to the third and the 5x squared. So that would be a cubic binomial. That would be how you would name it. Okay. The next set of questions are adding and subtracting. So when you add, all you're doing is combining like terms. Okay. So for instance, 8x squared plus 7x squared is just 15x squared, not 15x to the fourth. It's 15x squared. You keep the same exponent. 5x plus 2x is just 7x. So you're just combining like terms.
So you never add the exponents, you keep the bigger one?
Correct. Okay. So if you are going through it like this, if you're subtracting, I'll give you an example. So in this one, you have to be careful on the subtracting. So you look at 2x to the third minus 4x to the third. That's 2 minus 4. That is a negative 2x to the third. And then 6 minus negative 3. Some people look at that and they say 6, and they see negative 3, and they think it's 3. But it's not. You add it, right? Because it's 6 minus negative 3. That would be 9x. Okay? So you have to read it with the middle sign and then whatever sign is in front of the actual number. So that's your adding and subtracting. That's your second section of the test. Then we go to section 3. It is multiplying. To multiply, you're either going to have something like this, or go down.
When you multiply, is that when you add exponents?
Yes. So the first one, something like that, that is the box method, right? So if I have x plus 8 and x plus 3, I'm going to say x, 8, and I'm going to say x, 3. And then I'm going to multiply each thing with the box. That's like FOIL or the box method. So x times x is x squared, 8 times x is 8x, x times 3 is 3x, and 8 times 3 is 24. And then you combine your diagonal in the box. So that's your like term. So you have x squared plus 11x plus 24 as your final answer. Okay? So you're just doing the box method if you have that. If you have one like this, that's just distributing, right? So we just take the number on the outside and multiply in. 8 times x squared is 8x squared, plus 8 times 4x is 32x. So all you do is distribute. So you're either going to use the box method when you're multiplying, or you're going to distribute, okay? The fourth method on here is dividing. That's where we have synthetic division. Okay, so that's the new.
That's space, right?
Sure.
That is space.
Yep. That's the new. That's where you divide without actually having to divide. So if we have a problem that has x squared plus 3x minus 5, and it's divided by x minus 2. The number you're dividing by, you put the opposite of that number because you're saying x minus 2 equals 0. So you put the opposite of that in the box. So if you say x minus 2 equals 0, x is going to equal 2. So you put a 2 in the box, and then this is a 1, because there's 1x squared. This is a 3, and this is a negative 5. So 1, 3, negative 5. You take the first number, and you bring it down below the line. There's the 1, and we have a worksheet, and you have notes that go over this too. Then you multiply by the number in the box. So 1 times 2 is 2, so it goes right here in the next open spot. And you add. So it's multiplying and adding. That's why they call it synthetic division. You're not actually dividing, you're multiplying and adding. 3 plus 2 is 5. And then you multiply. 2 times 5 gives you 10. And then you add negative 5 plus 10 gives you 5. And that is your remainder over there, that 5. That 5 is your remainder. So you end up with, that's 1x plus 5. And then you have a remainder over there.
So do you always use the number that's in the back?
Yes.
So if it's a positive, I make it a negative?
Yes.
So like for the answer, do we write it like that, or do we need like?
You'll have to go 1x plus 5. It'll be multiple choice, but the remainder will be over what you're dividing by. And if it started with x squared and you divide, you'll always go down a power. So this will be 1x, and then that would just be 5.
So if it starts with x cubed.
Then your answer starts with x squared.
So, okay.
If it starts with x to the fourth, and your answer
Just take
starts
one
with x
away.
to the third. Yes.
Okay.
When you divide, you're taking one power away. Okay? The fifth one is evaluate. That is called it was called the remainder theorem. The fifth section that says evaluate, all you do is plug the number in for x in parentheses. Okay? But you have to be careful that you get all the powers and everything correct as you do that. So you can do that on Desmos, or you can do it on one of the calculators over there. But on the ones that say evaluate, it says evaluate each function at the given value. You just plug the number in for x in parentheses. So if it is 2x to the third plus 6x minus 4, and it says f of negative 3, then what we would do is everywhere we see an x, we would plug in a negative 3. And we would get an answer. Okay, so we would say 2, parentheses, negative 3 to the third, plus 6, parentheses, negative 3, minus 4. So everywhere there was an x, we would go and we would plug in negative 3. That's the evaluate part. And then you just put that in your calculator. And I can do that. It's negative 54. That's negative 76. You can check me and make sure I'm right, but that's what it is. Now, the last part, well, we're almost there. The sixth part on here, these are going to be the easier ones. This says find all roots. To do that, you're going to go to y equals, find the graph. Let's say it looks like this. The roots are where it crosses the x-axis. So all you're looking at is where does the graph cross the x-axis. Those are your roots. Okay? These are called your roots. Where the graph, think about the roots of a tree. They start right at the ground. And that's exactly where the roots of the equation are. Okay? So those are the roots. Find all the roots. All right. And then Section 7, the last one, says to graph. It actually says to sketch the graph, but again, it's multiple choice. So you just go to y equals, you look at your graph, and you see what type of graph it is, and you match it with the correct graph.
That's a linear graph.
So that's what, that one's a quadratic. But a linear would just be a straight line. Quadratic is the U. So moving forward, here's the questions. So as you go through, it's going to go in that order with the sections that I have 1, 2. I have them numbered. So if you're in the first couple problems, you're doing the naming of polynomials. If you're in the next set, you're doing adding and subtracting polynomials. When we get to the third set, you're into multiplying polynomials. The fourth set is the synthetic division of polynomials. The fifth set is evaluating, which means we're plugging a number in for polynomials. The sixth set is finding the roots, which is where it crosses the x-axis. And then the seventh one is sketching the shape of the graph. Okay, so what you'll do is, again, you'll complete this and you'll be able to, you just submit it. I've got an open spot on Canvas for you to submit the questions, the answers into there. So you can, you'll turn in the paper. So it's your paper. You'll submit it on Canvas, but you'll just take a picture of the paper or either however you want to submit the work on there. So your hints for Unit 6 on polynomials, and we'll continue through. Remember, this is a test grade, so it will help or hurt depending on how you do it. It will help your grade as you go through the process. So this is the Unit 6 polynomials test, and that's, again, if you look at each test, I've given you the hints of all the sections for kind of how to go through and how to go about the questions in it.